do. So,
Okay.
I know in this case, luckily after my disastrous last session, there is no, so there are no speakers per se, correct? It's you're leading.
Yeah.
No, but I mean like there's no remote speakers or anything.
No remote.
So this wonderful person in the back,
Okay.
different person in my last name, but nonetheless, he will be making sure that the people who are online are getting all of their stuff done.
Okay. Cool.
So, yes. So anyone that was in the really bad A3, as I said, why we don't have hybrid conferences. And like nothing would connect. The one from Nigeria couldn't get on. She finally gets on, and she seems to be tapping the computer the whole time, so you couldn't hear a thing. It was
Oh,
not good.
goodness. We had a positive session in our last one. Two in person, 2 online. Everything worked.
Canadians do a better job with online with hybrid than
Well,
Americans.
some of us did not want to. There was a suggestion from our organizers that really wanted to have pre-recorded for anyone that was out, and someone bought that, and so now we're getting told who says, including me saying that. But
Do you want to get started, Michelle?
Yes.
Okay.
So just in case we have folks online, I'm going to use the microphone. I'm Michelle Hazlett. I'm a data librarian at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Over the past 2 years, I've been chair of the Racial Justice Resources Interest Group. It's changed names several times now, but we are still working on the same stuff. So in terms of where we've been, do you want to introduce yourself and then, okay.
Yeah.
Why don't you go ahead?
I'll invite you back up. How's
Okay.
that? Okay. So, welcome everyone. I'm Meryl Brodsky. I'm the Communication and School of Information librarian at the University of Texas, Austin. So we thought that unlike other sessions, this session would be active, in which you are actually participants. So if you've brought your computer or something, you can bring it out. Where it's an opportunity for IASSIST when we come together at the same time and place. So we want to take advantage of being here to collect some of your specialized knowledge that you or someone on your team may have. So we are going to invite you to learn about the anti-racism interest group and see the lists that we've put together, add resources to our list, and if you haven't brought a laptop or a device, hopefully you can share with a friend. So first we wanted to recognize and acknowledge the site of the conference. It stands on indigenous territory known as the Lenape-Hoking, the traditional homelands of the Lenape, also called the Lenni Lenape or Delaware Indians. These are the people who during the 1680s negotiated with William Penn to facilitate the founding of the colony of Pennsylvania. Their descendants today include the Delaware tribe and Delaware Nation of Oklahoma, the Nanticoke Lenni Lenape, Ramapo Lenape, and the Powhatan Lenape of New Jersey, and the Munsee Delaware of Ontario. So here's our basic plan. We're going to tell you about the origins of the Anti-Racism Resources Interest Group, and we'll talk about the data sources list and what I'm calling the tools and methods list. It's actually articles, rubrics, it has multiple things. We'll show you the intake form, take questions, and then set you free to add resources to our list, please. Okay, Michelle.
So in the summer of 2020, there were a number of, I will just say, murders of African Americans in the United States that inflamed public outrage about the treatment of African Americans and blacks in the United States. And as a result of those killings, we in IASSIST broadly began to examine practices within the organization that would encourage researchers in many fields to examine their research practices for unconscious bias, look for data sources that would enable people to document racism, encourage anti-racism efforts, and make it easier for researchers to find the kind of data they were looking for in these areas. So that started as an action group. It was confirmed in December of 2020. We worked on a number of projects in the first year, but I wasn't very organized. And the second year was a lot more productive because a lot of other people got more involved, and we broke down the tasks into different subgroups that then made a lot more progress than I was making myself. So the 4 green boxes here are the different projects that we were working on. We decided that there were an awful lot of researchers who were doing research across national boundaries, and that in a lot of cases we were helping researchers navigate how different countries collect data differently about race. And so we decided that it might be helpful to have some resources that explained how different countries approach or don't approach the collection of data about race and ethnicity, and that we could do a collective webinar about those resources, the essays that were written by members of the interest group. So the first 4 essays address, unfortunately, very European, Western countries. The 4 were the United States, Canada, Germany, and the UK. And that was simply based on the countries that we got volunteers for to write these essays. I will say that the authors of these essays were pretty brave. They weren't experts in these areas, and they were concerned about getting it wrong. But they did the research, they looked at the literature, they gathered information from those specific countries about their attitudes towards race, their histories. In the case of Germany, that country has essentially stopped collecting data about race since the Nazi atrocities of World War II. So all of this came together in a webinar last November that involved those 4 authors talking about what they had found. We got some feedback, not unsurprisingly, about how sort of limited geographically those essays were in terms of geographic spread, and people who were interested in our getting more essays written and another webinar about different countries, different areas of the world. So we are continuing that effort. The website group was simply to create the website, the page on the IASSIST website that links to the resources that we're building. The resources lists subgroup is the one that Meryl chaired. Basically, the first year was kind of spent building those lists, and one list was data sources in this area, and the second list was articles, tools, and rubrics for rooting out unconscious bias. So Meryl's group took those lists and cleaned up the metadata and made the metadata more consistent, and then applied some topical subgroups to the overall list so that the usability of the list was improved in terms of being able to quickly jump to those parts of the list that people are particularly interested in. The finding data subgroup, in the course of writing the essay about the US, that group member found that she was really referencing a lot of different kinds of resources. I'm conflating two projects here. So I'll finish about that particular project, even though that's not exactly what the finding data subgroup was. She compiled a Zotero bibliography of all of the resources that she used and suggested that other authors of essays might want to do the same and add their resources to that bibliography. So we are now offering that as an open library for anyone who wants to read more about a particular country and the literature that was used to write these essays. Then the finding data subgroup, it was considered that our list was never going to be comprehensive. There is just no way to capture everything. So the idea was that if someone consulted our list and was not able to find data about the topic they were particularly interested in, we could provide guidance about how to go about looking for those data, whatever data they were in search of. And so the finding data subgroup took a sort of checklist of possible strategies and sources to check for other data sources and reformatted it for the web and made it greatly condensed and so also more usable. So that's kind of the history of the projects that we've been working on and where we are to date. At this point, all of the resources that we've been working on are linked from the interest group's webpage, and we are continuing to add to those, but we are, what did we decide on? Well, Arbery, you were in the earlier session in the interest group meeting when we talked about steady state? Was that it?
Do we have anyone that's online or not?
I don't know. Do we have anyone online?
Okay, then we don't have to bother with mine. All right.
Perfect.
So yeah, I mean, one of the things that we want to make sure for anything that we do, I mean, we're all used to be involved in a lot of projects, everybody's enthusiastic, and then it dies. So whatever we do really needs to be sustainable, just to be able to carry forward. And some of these I think are probably, quite sustainable, like the rules and stuff, and others, the links will write, we know that, so we'll need people to keep this going.
So the idea is that we're not done with these projects. We can always add more to the projects, and the more that we add over time, the more likely it is that interest will be maintained in the resources and we'll be able to sustain the effort. So we're not saying that the current projects are done. We're just saying they're in sort of a steady state where we can focus on other things in addition to maintaining what we've already done. So the idea is that we're looking at other topics, other cases of discrimination where it would be helpful to have more data about what's really happening there and how that discrimination manifests and the effects of that discrimination and so forth. So we are going to continue to add to the anti-racism resources, but now we're also looking at potentially other issues to be decided, like ageism, which there was just a presentation about, sexism, discrimination on the basis of religion or other such topics, ableism. And the group as a whole is going to decide which topics they particularly want to focus on for the coming year, but in the meantime, that doesn't prevent people from adding resources that are of interest to them particularly.
And forgetting what I just said, we do need to speak into the mic because this is being recorded, so in case anyone
recordings.
watches later, so forget what I said.
Okay, so this is a view of the tools, articles, and rubrics list. This is a resource that absolutely can use more attention. When we asked people for suggestions of data sources, people threw out gobs of suggestions. We have more than 100 of those. But for the articles, tools, and rubrics, there was really one person who focused on that, and that was Nancy Kassam Adams, who works here in Philadelphia, or used to work at the Children's Hospital. So there are only about 30 or 35 of these tools. I have already been thinking about adding articles about the care principles, which were also referred to in Bob Ray's session, this last one. But there are tons of other tools, I'm sure, that are out there that could be added. So that's one of the things that we're looking at today. If people have suggestions of guidance about rooting out unconscious bias from research, this is the list that kind of resource would be added to. And I'm going to turn it back to Meryl to talk about the data sources list.
Thank you. So the data sources list is comprised of data sets and projects documenting anti-racism. These are linked on the IASSIST website, and you can go there now and take a look at them. These are intended to be sources that were either hard to find or unknown or special time-sensitive sources. So as such, you'll see that many of them will fall into the police misconduct heading because they evolved from police misconduct, the deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor in the United States. And so at their core, they should be helpful to researchers who are looking at issues of race and ethnicity and discrimination. Some of them may be local sources, such as Mapping Prejudice, which is a project out of the University of Minnesota that looks at historical land covenants and tracks which neighborhoods in the Minneapolis area had restrictions around who property could be sold to. Other sources are national, such as the How Black Lives Matter Reached Every Corner in America, a project by the New York Times, which mapped where each protest occurred. So you can take some time and look at these when you like. You can look at it now if you want to. What we'd like you to see, we'd like you to take a look at it and sort of explore it, see the kinds of data sources that we're seeking. These were reviewed by our team, and everything should be up to date. We added the metadata from ICPSR. We used subject headings, and then the color coding was an interesting idea from one of our members who wanted to sort of track multiple themes at the same time. So you could sort it this way if you chose to. So that's that. And then I guess I'll just carry on here. So I created an intake form. That's Philadelphia on top in case you don't quite recognize it. Please use one form for each resource. It's the same form for both lists, data sources and articles, tools, methods. A few questions are just for one or the other, but we'll go through the form together now. And so if you could come along and take a look with me, it's at that tiny URL, which is http://tinyurl.com/53p6p7sc. And I'm going to try and join you. So The idea was to get your name and email to contact you in case we had any questions. Then if you could tell us which list you want it to be on, you can. You could say you're not sure. We can make that determination later.
Can you put the tiny URL again?
Oh, sorry. It's there it is. Well, I am planning to go back to it in a moment, but yeah. So then the title of the data set or the site you want to link to, who compiled it, maybe a one-line description, and then if it's a data source, what kind of data source is it? So I've given you a drop-down menu here. I'm having trouble with no mouse. It could be a project, so these would be organizations that regularly make data available. There's a lot of sites on incarceration that regularly publish data. It could be an actual data set. It could be a data aggregation, so it might be a site that posts links to multiple data sets or other studies. And it could be data journalism, such as that New York Times article. The Washington Post is also starting to publish a few things and put that data in GitHub. So that's helpful to know about. There is a tools and methods research type, and here we've got a publication like an article, or it could be an overview like that links to multiple sources, or it could be, again, an organization like a women's health organization that links to various things, or it could actually be a learning tool. So this might be a site where you can get training on how to do unbiased research. Then if there's a link to the project or a data link, you'll notice some of these are required and some aren't. The idea was to create the form to make life easier for you. So if you could just, if you need to speed through, you can. But if you want to fill in everything, that would certainly be helpful. Link for cautions or notes, the data type, geographic coverage, date or date coverage, and then for the theme or discipline, I left it optional, but this has some of the major ICPSR themes that we picked, option 9. Civil rights, discrimination, hate crimes, these kinds of things were what we found most often in our first go-around. Once we start adding other discriminatory things, we'll have to increase that theme list a bit. But that's basically the form. And our plan for this session, although with the small numbers, I'm not exactly sure how we'll commence, but the idea was to begin the hackathon portion. So, typically a hackathon is something that's used to bring together software coders to work on a common problem. And it's sort of unstructured and self-organized. So, and there's a firm deadline. So in this case, we've created the resource form to speed your work and make sure you include some things. If you have any questions, please ask. And now feel free to add resources, and hopefully you will have something, or you can at least look at what we have and learn about the tools that are available. So, any questions?
So going back to the title change, right? So going back to the title change, this is labeled anti-racism resources, but is that what you want us to stick to for right now, to feed into the existing?
That was the plan initially, yeah. We were sort of going to leave you with a where we're headed in the future slide at the end.
Just clarify.
I've got a similar question for clarification. Bruce Bocek from the Graduate School of Design at Harvard. Are we just interested in things that are explicitly anti-racist? Or are we interested in things as well that are about elevating Black experience and Black history in the U.S.? Because part of the reason I'm asking this is one of the projects that I've been helping out with at the Graduate School of Design is called the African American Design Nexus. And it's all about elevating Black and African American designers in the U.S. and around the world now as well. So that's a project I would think of putting in, but it's anti-racist because of the positive goal that it's doing, but it's not explicitly anti-racist in terms of kind of the fight or the battle, I guess is a way to put it. Yeah.
I think, I'm just going to speak. I think that's exactly what we need, because as many people, I maintain a data catalog at Princeton, and I've gone through these and I look, and it's all negative. It's bad health outcomes, it's going to prison, it's racism, it's all the bad. And so finding things that cast forward in a positive light, it didn't have to be cast forward in a positive light. Honestly, just things that someone could use to me to refer to one of the communities, but and again, we're not, just as an example, we're probably not going to include the Black election studies. Those are pretty well known. So it's really things that are not as well known. So I don't know about yours, Bruce, so that sounds positive and great.
So I'll concur with that. My inclination when questions like this have come up in the past is to be more inclusive rather than less inclusive. Part of the reason, so sort of the evolution of the group grew out of my creating a list like this for my own campus. And when I was first looking into this, that was one of the things that I wanted personally to include in my own guide, was resources that highlight the positives. So I would say yes. Any other comments?
No, we welcome your contribution.
And I also have they're not really long questions, but I have a couple of other projects that I've worked with other people on over the years, and they've written research articles or web pages that don't necessarily have public data that they're sharing out to the community, but the articles or the projects themselves are worth sharing with wider communities as resources to include in discussions. One was a professor at Brown who was looking at the treatment of Black students in public schools, and she used qualitative analysis tools and quantitative statistical analysis to demonstrate that Black students were generally getting treated more horribly in public schools. But I don't think she's made the data available, but the research articles are definitely accessible. So I'd be interested in sharing those on a list, if that's enough. I mean, I think some of what you're interested in is larger, more kind of comprehensive data sets.
I wouldn't necessarily even limit it to larger, more comprehensive data sets, because a lot of these are pretty niche specific. But it seems to me that what you're describing might actually be another category of resource that we could offer. In addition to the open Zotero library of sort of national attitudes towards race data collection, it could be another bibliography of interesting research that people ought to check out. So it might not fit exactly into the form as we've designed it, but go ahead and submit it. We'd like to hear about that too.
Yeah, it might fit as a project, and there are articles on many of the project sites, so that's not completely out of the norm.
And again, particularly if there are summary statistics, you know, because perhaps they weren't able to put the data because qualitative. You know, I think of Roper. So Roper, you know, we always think about the micro data sets. That's like 10% of the archive. Most of it's what I call top lines. So in this case, it's embedded in an article, but it may be the only time you find that. So I, again, think those things are valuable.
Anything else? Okay.
Have at it.
_IASSIST.
There, Jeremy, remember this is being recorded, but luckily that was not on the mic. This is so secure.
Not sure what good that does to anybody after the fact. Maybe from Norway. Looks like that do you, right?
Well, it's like, Monday, exactly before we got this, it's like, Tomas was like, I can't log in, I'm like, I think several of us can pretend to all be in my hotel room, because, why not? Use my hotel room, yeah.
here and ask questions.
Do we really need to mic this? Who's gonna
For the
watch the
recording.
quiet hackathon portion?
That's true.
Yep. Wait, let's cut the recording. So I added a couple of things that I, know about, but I'm thinking, like, I kind of feel uncomfortable then starting to just Googling for things, and like, I wouldn't want to add something until I sat and kind of analyzed it and thought about it. So, just wondering.
It is fine to add things at any time.
Okay.
Yeah, but if you feel like you've done what you wanna do, that's okay too, there's
Okay.
no pressure
Yeah.
here. I think, I spent a lot of time working on the list with the team of folks, and there's some real gems on there, so you can look at the list and see what's there. Maybe for me in my work, I'm a librarian, this is very helpful to know that these sources exist, and so, I was sort of a little surprised, like, oh, maybe I've known about this or whatever, so, I think we'll give everyone maybe 10 more minutes and then check in to see if we need to close it out, but, yeah.
And I mean, I'd be curious to discover more things, but it's just like
Right.
to kind of just take a step back and say, okay, who's behind that? Is it really good? Like before throwing it in the form.
Yeah, I think because of people's past experiences, maybe they run across certain things or just know this exists and it's hard to find. There are a couple of sources on the list that are ICPSR, and I'm sort of of a mixed mind about that. Like, if it's in ICPSR, we sort of know about it, but maybe not. So
Sometimes it's hard to find stuff in CPSR. When there's a lot of stuff in one repository, right? Like, by definition, it becomes more difficult to find. But,
And I
Well,
would,
there's at least one ICPSR study that I might have put in there that the specific reason I did is because Liz Stevenson, if you knew her as a longtime IASSIST member, she knew of a particular study about race that was done just before and just after the riots after Rodney King was beaten. And so that study is important and serendipitous. And how would you ever know that? There's nothing in the description in ICPSR that says, that calls attention to that. So that was something that I was like, yeah, we really need to include this, even if it's in the ICPSR.
I was gonna say, I shouldn't have the exact percentage, but, roughly 74%, something like that, of items are DDI coded. That still means about a quarter of the archive is not. So particularly if something older, because everything these days is, but something older that either has something like you said, where you would find it in the description or you would find it in the variable database. I think those are important. If there's an oversampling or something, they may or may not have mentioned in the description, but they may not have. So again, if there's something like that, and I'd say one of the things that we could also do is if there is, like the Rodney King, I would assume there's like at least some coding, but of course we know that if it shows up as a variable rather than a question, you wouldn't really see. But if there is an older study, ICPSR has an endless backlog. I would add the same to Roper, but Roper is really looking also, there are zillions of data sets that there's not the microdata. But if you recommend something, it moves higher in the queue. So, something really important. I guarantee you, I'm having dinner with Kathleen tonight, so I guarantee you she would make sure that it goes towards the top.
So, full disclosure, I'm not a librarian.
Not necessary.
I work for Sage, and I was just interested in this resource and learning more about it. So I've sort of spent this time, just looking around online to see what I could find, but also talking to a friend of mine who's a scholar who's defer to you as to the usefulness was some resources from the Anti-Defamation League that are not present but look like they're downloadable. There's a heat map of like incidents, crimes, you know, that like I think it's 20 years of data total.
Cool.
So
That's significant. Lots of these places have like a 1 year data.
Put this student on that data.
yeah.
And then I would say, you know, as a person who is at age, then, you know, is this something that could then be taken back to be incorporated into Sage data, formally data?
I think potentially. I have to admit I'm not the lead on that,
Right.
but
Tell
I think
Robert that he wants it.
I will. I know of you actually. And yeah, Mom has a great relationship with Sage. So, but yeah, it's just so fascinating, many different.
But, you know, we get stuck in our ruts. So,
Sure.
like, I was like, oh, why didn't I think of the Anti-Defamation League? Of course. Yeah.
Alright, well, then I'll put it in.
I had another question that came up. I was thinking about this earlier when you were talking about that some of these things, like, you know, they're already in repositories or whatever, but some of the things, especially like the data journalism kind of stuff, has there been any thought about like trying to like capture some of these things in case they go away, or when I should say they go away? Because, you know, eventually the newsrooms move on like everything else, and like some of this stuff will disappear, but may still be useful. I mean, some of it's like in GitHub, and presumably that'll still stick around for a while. But I wonder, like, you know, as much as some of that's open, whether like just sort of creating a shadow backup as part of this resource might not be a useful thing.
I think it's into how great our resources are. IASSIST doesn't have a home. So
We
to
talked about
speak.
this earlier in the discussion.
So, I don't know what our resources are for capturing it and storing it, like if GitHub will be a way to do that, or if there might be some other, I mean, ICPSR is not a home for that. So, I think would take some thought and conversation about
Where to store it.
how much storage we might want to devote to that and how to do that.
But if it is something that does involve, that either requires permission, well, first of all, if we're putting it in public, we should really get permission unless it's grabbing data. But you could put it into open ICPSR. I mean, that would be a way, it's free to everyone, and a lot of things have been captured that way.
I guess I was thinking about articles and
Oh, articles,
heat maps
right.
and stuff like that, but
No, I was
datasets
actually thinking
have-
like data, like, you know, like New York Times or whatever does something and they
Yeah.
make their data set available on GitHub or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
it's there now. I don't have any confidence that it will be in 10 years.
Yeah, that we would obviously need permission from the New York Times, but if we get it, as I said, open ICPSR would be certainly possible for that.
Yeah, I went to a presentation they gave about their data channel, I mean, they have teams of people doing
Yeah.
these things now, really. So I hope that they're not going to just let them dissipate.
But it's, you know, you never know.
I agree.
I would say the Washington Post, I would put it in pretty much the same. I know there have been things from it that I used that suddenly went away. So,
Okay.
Yeah, even standard stuff. I mean, like, you know, CNN like has had for, you know, 2 decades like these really nice sort of election pages, right? Like in the area that I do, and they go away after a while. Like, they're not going to keep, or you know, they could, but they don't. Like, you know, it gets increasingly hard to find like what happened in the 2004 election thing. They had like, you know, sort of summary. And it wasn't like really, you know, it wasn't microdata or anything. It was often sort of summary data of like the national exit polls and stuff that otherwise was really, really hard to get. So, you know, that kind of stuff goes away.
someone who has their computer open, I guess go to the Internet Archive and see if the New York Times data things are being captured.
It's a good question. I mean, it's not, well,
They're
part of the
pretty
problem is,
surface
right, they're-
level, so I don't know if they capture database, but it's.
yeah, so they won't be able to get static content, right? So if it's something that's like, you know, interactive, you'll miss all that.
Yes.
And I don't know, I mean, I guess you could look to see if they're crawling like their GitHub pages to like actually download the underlying data.
I mean, I guess, you know, but
Part of that might also be that
And
the
maybe, you know,
original page was served up with whatever their web setup was 20 years ago. They're not going to keep it working, right? That's
Right.
the other thing. But you could, if it was a setup like that, you could mirror it and have it sit somewhere. But it requires somebody, right? Somebody's got to still watch that to make sure that it works.
Yeah.
How many of you like Vostok's? How many of you like Vostok's projects that are still up that are 10 years old?
and completely off topic, but just since we have, you know, a few of us sitting in the room, in case anyone is not aware of the IB Plus projects that are capturing many things, like I think one of the most valuable is something that Jeremy is part of that captured zillions and zillions of local elections. But talk about something that goes away as soon as you lose. You know, it's that. And then, you know, like another project, you know, that I'm involved in is capturing all of the central banks and the statistical offices. But there are many, many of these. And again, it's, we know the Internet Archive can't get everything. And likewise, our projects cannot capture something that is CGI scripted or what have you, but it can at least capture the static content.
Where is that factor?
If you,
They have a website, of course, the open collections, whatever, but they've been ingesting them into WorldCat, I thought.
yes.
You can load them in your local.
Collection level, yes.
At the collection level,
And
yeah.
a couple of projects at the item level. So like Joanne and I like fight constantly to make sure that we're saying like it's useless at that level. It has to have each central bank and national statistical. The problem is so many of like Jeremy's, there's no way they can do that. But I believe like the music one, I mean it has nothing to do with what we're doing. I believe that they're doing title level. But yeah, if you just Google it, you should find it. There are a lot of ones dealing with, there were various things dealing with the LGBT issues, there were things,
so you said Ivy Plus, is that a repository?
no, so Ivy Plus is the Ivy League schools plus Stanford, University of Chicago, Johns Hopkins, MIT, essentially rich universities, and on the East Coast plus Stanford and Chicago. And basically there's a lot of different projects that go on, but one of the ones that started a few years ago was these web capturing projects, and it's available to anyone. You don't have to be an IB Plus member. And as I said, you know, like each one has a different mission. In order to get something off the ground, at least 3 institutions who are members have to agree to do something. I will say after that, it's often the one institution who cared that does
Yeah.
all the work.
Yeah.
But that said, you know, they are going
So, when you say Google it, would I be Googling Ivy Plus?
loving, I will find
Ivy
it.
Plus, Google Ivy Plus Web Archiving
Yes.
Project. And their collections in Archivec, which is just the sort of main platform for web archiving and capturing.
And like with the statistical offices and central banks, we are not following, let's just say, standard cataloging practices of the last decade, which is you have one subject heading that's useless. So Joanne and I do all the subject headings, and we will have sometimes 15, 20, 25 subject headings. But like we're literally going down the side of this dealt with labor, this dealt with health, this dealt with, so otherwise it's useless. So, but they're very behind in adding these, so.
If you search for IB Plus Web Resources Collection Program, that'll get you.
This is at the top level.
Yeah, and like what are some of the ones that might apply to this group? I only care about my own and Jeremy's, but, I mean, I know like there are ones dealing with, like posters dealing with certain things, I mean, they're all over the board in terms of topics. But I believe music, But like the music one, I know nothing to do with what we're doing, but it was a really interesting one. It's like looking at often less well-known artists from around the world that are largely publishing online, and the stuff goes away. And so how do you capture that stuff?
There was one about the Me Too movement in China.
Yes.
Whoa.
Yeah, so there's some really good ones.
Some interesting stuff, but yeah, it
We
really
haven't had that one
spans
in our
the
list.
gamut.
Yes.
That disappeared.
And some of these are, very short term because it is something that is happening and the feeling is like, get it now, but it's gonna go away because of the sensitivity.
All right, well, I guess we can start to wrap it up. So, how did it go? Any feedback that you want to share?
I find things that don't easily fit into your categories, but still find it worthwhile to put them in. So,
Categories grow.
Yeah, that's not a problem.
I'm happy to help you expand.
Thank you. Well, part of a hackathon is celebrating your accomplishments. So we got 8 new sources, so thank you. We really appreciate it. And please spread the word about the lists. We'd love to have participation from across the globe and get more perspectives, for sure. So Michelle is going to sum it up on where the group is headed.
So I talked about this a little bit earlier. We're looking to proceed to other topics, to catalog other data sources for all of the isms. We don't know what our specific topics are going to be for the coming year. We're going to invite group members to vote on what they want to focus on. But in our interest group meeting earlier today, we were also encouraging people to add resources for whatever topics they are particularly concerned about and not wait for the group. So there's that. We're still working on the anti-racism one, so if you come across more resources in that area, please let us know. Are we keeping the form up?
We could. We
Why
could.
not?
Yeah, we could. Yeah. And I didn't think about that.
Does it alert you when you get a new, do you get a email
No,
or something?
it doesn't.
You just have to check.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's okay, though.
So we can figure that out. We're expecting that the conference may bring in new members, and we've already had some of those folks actually sign up for our listserv already. So if any of you are not already on that list and want to join, we'd be happy to add you. If we add you to the listserv, then you're sure to get information about group meetings. So if you would like to participate in the group, you're welcome to do that too. And there will be voting about the best time, the time that works best for the most people. So, yeah, let us know what you want to see and what you want us to do, and please participate.
I encourage you to go to the poster sessions. There are
Yes.
number ones that are dealing with topics that would relate, such as Central Asia and Mongolia gender data portal. Not to name any names, but and then showcasing the visibility of diverse populations in scholarly publications, increasing diversity and inclusivity, and data archiving the UKDA way. Let's see. Examining racial attitudes, ethnicity, and inequality through the UK Data Archive. We have something from Brazil. So there's a couple of these that I want to say because I think they were pulled out but anyway, there are lots of great posters, but if nothing else, we know Ryan's going to be fabulous. So.
If you literally can't make it, I have a flyer to take right now.
You can make it. You can make it.
It's not far away.
T. Wine will give you a personal preview.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody, for coming.
Thank you. As I say, don't promote my clients.
Since you brought up the question about including the positive aspects